Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God made man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Welcome back to the Dominion Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jeremy.
And I'm Alex.
We got a special guest today. You want to do some...
Yeah, we are excited, honored to be joined today by Dr. Scott Masson. Brother, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you.
And this has been a long time coming. I've brought up Scott's name to you and to our board for honestly several years now. So thanks for being willing to make the trek and enduring the 401. It's no easy task.
It was an odyssey.
Yeah. So yes. So if you sense a little bit of angst in his voice, just know what he went through to be here. But for those who don't know, Dr. Masson is a literature professor at a Christian university. And I know him because of our overlapping interest in and passion for recovery of classical Christian education. He founded one of the first classical Christian schools in Canada. Was it the first, or
it's first in recent times?
Okay,
Westminster Classical, and there's one up in Ottawa. It's St. Timothy's. It's been around for decades.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so certainly one of the pioneers.
Yeah.
And I think how I got to know Scott was through that movement, and he's certainly been, an intellectual laborer in the movement more broadly, cultural apologetics as well. So that's how I have kind of come into his orbit. So again, brother, thanks for joining us. And the reason that I asked you to be on the show, as I was saying, was because we wanted to do an episode on the nature of humanity, on human nature and identity. And the reason for that, I mean, in one sense, it should be self-apparent. This is obviously a very important topic. But it seems to me that at the bottom of a lot of our social kind of deconstruction that's taken place, and just the depravity that's taken place, and the injustice, is a view is basically we've rejected a Christian view of humanity, and if we are going to recover justice and freedom, we need to recover a biblical view and a valuing of humanity. And when I went to do a little bit of, your intro beforehand, I just remembered that your newsletter is called The Recovered Image. And then the subtitle is Promoting a Culture of Freedom and Dignity by Restoring Christian Humanism. And I'm like, this is our guy.
There you go.
This is our guy. So thanks for being on. I thought where we could actually start, because I do think there's overlap here, is to have a brief discussion on literature.
Yeah.
And I'm not very learned in this realm. Jeremy's a fairly well-read man, despite his appearance.
Ouch.
From the shirt.
It's okay.
It's your friend, right here.
With friends like these,
These enemies. But what is it that led you into the study of literature, and then obviously teaching and writing on these things for some time now?
Well, when I went to university at Huron College, I didn't know what I wanted to do, like most undergrads. And first year at Western was very general. You didn't have to say what major you're going to go into. English was one of the 5 courses I took, and it was the only one that really caught me. To my surprise, it was the 5th that I added to it, because I thought I was going to go in the business direction. I did business, economics, psych, math, and then English. English is the one that grabbed me, and I realized that there was more there than I thought there was when I studied English in school. I was always a reader, but it was when I did English as an undergrad. We started with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, then went to Paradise Lost. When I read Paradise Lost, it really grabbed me. And I didn't even know half of what I was reading. I knew, though, that I wanted to know. I knew there was a depth there and a profundity about humanity that I had totally missed, and I knew that I needed to work hard to get there because I had coasted throughout my high school. I had no work habits whatsoever. And so that pushed me to dedicate myself to studying and working for the first time in my studies. I was a bit angry about not having worked, didn't blame myself, typical 18, 19-year-old. I blamed other people for what I hadn't done. But I worked really, really hard at that point, and under the influence of a few Christian professors, one of whom had studied with Lewis and Tolkien, a medievalist, yes, was pushed more and more in the direction of Christianity and culture, and I was convinced that Christ was the center of everything important in Western culture. I was convinced of that early on. I wasn't a converted man at that point, but still, intellectually, I was drawn.
It was just obvious to you.
It was obvious to me. Yeah. It was in the literature. It was so patent, especially medieval, but then Renaissance literature, I mean, all the way up until the Romantics, and then there's this big flip. So that's where I started, and when I graduated, I realized, where this was really rich was in the medieval Renaissance period, so I wanted to be a medievalist. Went to Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies. They said, well, if you want to do that, you're going to have to learn Latin and at least one or two European languages. So I decided to go visit a friend who I'd met in fourth year at Western, visited him in Germany, and I studied classics when I was there. I learned German first, then I learned Greek and Latin through German. I realized I had a facility for languages, which I did not realize I had. And I just threw myself into it. I did a lot of work there, got to the point where I was translating Homer, at least at a, I don't want to overstate how fluent I was, but I could read it. And realized, though, I didn't want to keep going down that path because as much as I valued that, the purpose of it was to find Christ, and I wasn't finding that in the classical literature as much as I appreciated it. So then I applied. Thought, well, where is that then? Well, it was back in English literature, so I'm going to study English literature. I don't want to do this in Germany because I had to take a third subject, and it was going to take another 4 years. I'll apply. So I applied to Britain, went to Durham, did really well. They offered me a full scholarship, and I still hadn't found Christ. And it's a funny thing when you get one of the 5 scholarships the university offers and you are not happy. But
I've never had that feeling, but yeah.
No, but it's just like, so on one stand, I'd worked very hard. I had succeeded, I was, excelling, and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to do it. And then that summer, I met somebody who it was at the University of Durham. It's a very small little medieval cathedral town. She said, I'm going to meet some other friends of ours at the pub. Do you want to come along? Sure. I go to the pub. There's a conversation going on about Christianity and literature. And there's a fight going on between an atheist and a Christian. And I'm sitting there listening really attentively. And the Christian defended her position really well. And I thought, yes, and the others are just, I think we're just taking pot shots. She said, you should come to my church afterwards. And I didn't at first, but then a month later, because it's a small place, she said, come this Sunday. I came, and then I went, and it was just like,
wow,
this is what I was looking for. And so that was the transition between my master's and my PhD. So when I got my master's, got the full scholarship, I was not a Christian. When I started my PhD, I was. And so then I had a fight with my supervisor over all sorts of things. Because now I'm in I'm a romantics, like that's the focus of my studies. And this is the period when everything gets inverted and flipped upside down, and modern hermeneutics begins. And I had to rework and think about all of the reasons why the liberal mindset is problematic for pretty much everything. Not just for the Christian faith, but in terms of an intellectual Christian worldview. It is, there's no common ground there, really. Everything gets inverted. So then I had to work that out for myself. I had to think about it without guidance, other than hearing expository preaching every Sunday, twice a week, Bible studies, etc. But I had to think it through. I had no mentors or guides.
Can you describe what some of those changes were in the thinking between a classical or medieval mindset and the Romantic mindset?
Well, I'll tell you the way I think about it now rather than the way I thought about it then, because my thoughts are a bit more mature now. What the Romantic, the way I explain this as well to other people, is that in the Romantic period, they have a different view of heroism and the purpose of Christian life, the purpose of human life. And it's centered around this idea of the orphan as a hero. Many people have heard me say this now, but until you hear it, it doesn't really occur to you that how ubiquitous the idea of an orphan is in modern literature. But I noticed in Romantic literature, so Byron, Keats, Shelley, Wordsworth, and so on, but then in the Victorian period with Dickens, but then Jane Eyre, it's just all over the place, and that persists over into right up into the present day, and Harry Potter and James Bond and all the Marvel superheroes are orphans who have to construct their own identity out of their own insight. Something within them is leading them forward. It's not apparent. It's not. Right. And I realized that is a different model of education. And that there's even a name for it that the Germans give it called Bildung, which is sometimes translated as education, but then the word Paideia for the Greeks and for Christians is also education. So what's the difference between the two? And the difference is that Paideia contains a whole worldview. It contains parents and passing on intergenerational learning and so forth. And it assumes a certain role modeling as well. You follow the example of a mentor,
yes,
or a parent, and you imitate the example of that person. Whereas in Bildung, it's called self-cultivation is one of the ways. You are your own teacher. It's you direct your own. Jordan Peterson has a program now called self-authoring. It's an absurd term, but it's the psychological way of expressing the same concept of Bildung. You are authoring yourself. You're creating your own identity from within, and nobody can teach you what to do. You are doing that yourself. So it's an inverted psychological, subjective turn to education that then becomes the very template of the modern public university. Self-directed learning, self-guided, and self-centered.
It strikes me that idea of the orphan could translate into your adult life as just being completely untethered from stuff.
Well, it radically severs you from any objective reality.
Well, I think of Shelley. I don't know much about him. There's a book called what was that book by E. Michael Jones on Shelley and Frankenstein and all that?
Okay.
Anyway, talks about Shelley's, like, the way they lived was just totally hedonistic, and like they were just trying to separate themselves from every cultural norm and morality. So I wonder if that's sort of tethered to that idea of the orphan. You make your own morals, you make your own everything.
Well, his wife, or his second wife, Mary, Frankenstein is an orphan himself. Like, he's a created entity, and he's abandoned by the scientists. So he effectively creates, and she writes a Bildungsroman. So it's a novel that's related to the development of the individual there, and the creature. Or the monster has been abandoned and has to fend for himself and develop his own self. And he does it by reading Paradise Lost, among other things, which is really interesting, and wishes that he'd had as much care and benevolence as Adam had, because his creator has abandoned him altogether. But as far as Percy Shelley and Mary go, well, yes, she runs off with Percy. They go to Geneva, hanging out with Lord Byron. He leaves his wife and 2 children behind. Interestingly on this, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, married William Godwin, both of them famous Enlightenment authors, both of them famous for calling marriage a sort of patriarchal institution that women should be liberated from.
It's convenient for the fellas, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're for that.
That's a good idea.
And so she wrote A Vindication of Rights of Women, Mary Wollstonecraft, in response to Thomas Paine, Rights of Man. She writes The Rights of Women. And she dies in childbirth, but William Godwin writes a book on social justice, which is quite interesting. And he's very much in favor of autonomy until his daughter runs off with a man who's already married. And then he's scandalized, doesn't like it then, of course, because it's a great idea, but not for my own family. And he's scandalized by it. Of course.
What's that term about ideas and consequences?
Yeah. Well,
okay, so
I remember the name of that book. It was called Monsters from the Id. It's a really good book.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you just said that has my brain kind of spinning here. So even you're bringing up the idea as well that our method of education will be rooted in our understanding of what a human is.
yes.
And if our idea of what a human is changes, the method of educating them will change as well.
Yes.
So this, I wasn't planning on this, but this is probably helpful. I'm not familiar with this, even though we've started a classical Christian school. But where did the? I'm assuming that obviously the classical method in one sense finds its roots in the ancient world.
Yeah.
But there's an overlap with the Christian pedagogy that like so much. So could you explain maybe the how does a pagan view of humanity and education mesh with Christianity so well? And maybe where does it differ? And where did Christians kind of springboard off of that to create their own methods of education?
So the word Paideia I already used. It's the way that Greek culture was transmitted. It is the word that they use for education. Pais is the word for a child, from which we get pediatric and so forth, pediatrician. And it is a holistic, role model based moral training in things of honor and shame. In Homer's Odyssey, Telemachus, whom we meet right at the outset of that work, books 1 to 4, is effectively fatherless. His father Odysseus has been at war, away from home for 20 years. He's grown up without a father. A figure named Mentor arises. It's Athena, the goddess of wisdom in disguise, to push him out of his house and say, you need to experience something in the world. Go out and find about what happened to your father. And he goes away and so forth. But this idea of having a male role model for males is a part of the whole Paideia tradition. It does involve following a moral example of a wise old man.
Imitation.
It's imitation.
Yeah.
Imitatio.
Yeah.
That's the Latin word for it. Mimesis is the Greek word for it. And it's mimesis, the representation of reality, but in the terms of education, it's following in the example of a man who has mastered his craft. You do what the master does by following his example. That's how you learn. That's the way most people learn best. They do it alongside somebody who knows what they're doing. Don't do it this way, do it this way. You hold the hammer like this and you hit the nail like down to the small details.
Which makes sense which explains why, as our culture has rejected the idea of a father, has sought to undermine at every level the idea of a father, our education, and they've tried to kind of compensate for that. We won't have the father as a central figure in the education of the children. So we'll replace that with the state.
Yeah.
But you can't compensate for a lack of someone to follow. Like if there's no imitation or bad things to imitate, no other program, state-led or otherwise, is going to make up for that.
Yeah, there's a move in the Enlightenment period to emancipate people from their families in terms of their ideal, which is autonomy, which is an ideal, but it's also an idol. And autonomy radically conceives as the law of the self. And in order to do this, you have to break with the past. And to really do that effectively, you have to break with families. So the first and most significant Enlightenment figure on this was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And he spoke about boo. Yeah, okay. but he
don't like him around
he was pretty,
here.
No, I know. But he's pretty consistent with his principles on this. He had 5 children, all out of wedlock, and he put them all in orphanages, which is an extraordinary thing to do. But he was the most influential figure of the 18th century. Like, he's an extraordinarily influential writer. And that ideal of autonomy and the idea of experts raising your children, and you're doing your children a favor by severing them from the previous generation, which is compromised by civilization, and going back to nature in the process, that then becomes, like in the Romantics, they think we're going back to nature. Yeah, but they don't mean going back and wandering around the woods. They mean breaking the family and the corruption of civilization from human nature by getting away from that. And so it's not coincidental that state education begins in the late 18th, early 19th century.
But this is all just a front to separate people from their Christian heritage. Like, because it's pretty incoherent to say you need to separate children from their families, but I'm going to tell you how to do, I'm going to write a book on how you should raise and educate your children. You're still deferring to some authority one way or the other.
Well, that's the implication of it, that they presented it more positively and said that everyone deserves to be educated, because a lot of people are not being educated at this point if they're too poor or whatever. We're going to make sure that everybody can be educated, because education's a good thing. And every Christian even to say, you're right, education's a good thing, and everyone should be educated because everyone bears the image and likeness of God, and to be like that, you need to be educated. And so it has a positive side to it. And now it can be, now that everyone can throw their money into the state coffers, and then everyone else will pay for the people who can't afford to educate their children. So it doesn't front itself as we're taking away from your parents, because nobody would have ever bought that.
No.
And I'm not even sure it was conceived as such, but that was the eventual effect. Because look, so the Ontario public education system is, if you look at its founding documents, is Christian in its language. I mean, it's very explicit.
Yes.
And every denomination was behind it.
Yeah.
There weren't people dissenting. They said, no, this is a good thing. We're not going to be denominational. We're not going to have a Presbyterian approach, a Baptist approach, an Anglican approach. We'll have a Protestant public education system. The Catholics eventually say, no, hold on, we're going to have our own. And they say, okay, you can have that. But the public school system, as we have it, was considered to be the Protestant education system. And over the course of time, the core commitments to autonomy start to permeate the system, and the Christian emphasis of its originating authors, men like Egerton Ryerson and so forth, fade away. But they're there even in the early mid-20th century. I mean, when I went to school, we still read scripture over the PA and read the Lord's Prayer, read from scripture, sang God Save the Queen, all that sort of stuff. So it was that's in the 70s. Eventually that goes as well. But it was there, and the universities were always ahead on the emancipation from the Christian faith front. Like they're all of their founding universities were confessional. Queen's is Presbyterian, McMaster's Baptist, Toronto is Anglican. Yep. You can go on. Waterloo's Lutheran, so on.
So, okay, so a couple more things here. You saw a connection between the Greek understanding of the necessity of imitation.
Yes.
And obviously this is a Christian value. And I think we've discussed, I've certainly read you say something to the effect of the contemporary evangelical church has certainly downplayed the doctrine of the imitation of Christ in recent years. Yeah. And I wonder, there's probably a lot we could say about this as well, but for now, we'll simply say imitation is critical to the Christian faith, both in our understanding of our Christology and how the Son imitates the Father and how he is able to reflect and represent the Father to us. And now by those who are saved by faith, by grace through faith, we now imitate him, and we imitate those who imitate him. We imitate Paul, who imitates Christ. And so discipleship is kind of the category a lot of Christians are familiar with.
Yes.
But we've hollowed out that term
Entirely.
where it is almost, it's go to the concert, go to the conference, go to the youth group,
The professional teacher.
Yes, the professional
or
thing.
discipleship only pertains to spiritual matters, or
Yes.
how you read scripture, how's your
Yes.
prayer life.
Yes.
Yes.
So a lot of this, though, kind of the shallow nature of Christian discipleship for the last, 50, 60 years, maybe even more than, like Schaeffer was talking about this. And
Absolutely.
a lot of that even is rooted in your understanding of humanity. Like
It all is.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
So the other question I had for you regarding literature is in relationship to hermeneutics.
Yeah.
Because I took my Old Testament teacher at TBS was Peter Gentry, Dr. Peter Gentry. And he is a fascinating guy because
So I heard.
his training is not actually in theology.
Yes.
It's in ancient languages
Yeah.
and literature.
Yes.
So what he brought to the table was teaching you to read the Bible as literature.
Yeah.
And one of the first things he would say is, what is the literary structure of the text? And that's something no one talks about.
I love it.
You know what I mean? So he would say everything, and it almost got to be, when I was younger, not quite an eye roll, but you're like, is this really that important? But it's like the structure to literature communicates something.
Of course it does.
And understanding how the Hebrew mind worked. And anyways, do you think that the abandonment of literature as a key component of an education for children has led to a shallow interpretation of Scripture? Like the church,
It absolutely has.
Yeah.
It absolutely has. So I was the speaker at the TBS grad, and I spoke about John. I spoke on John 1, and I talked about it as the way in which many Christians regard Scripture. They have a high view of Scripture, but they have a low view of the Word. They have a high view of the Word of God, capital W, but they have a low view of language, and they express that by not reading. And I said, there's a connection between Jesus, the Logos, and our view of language and the importance of language. And we express that practically in what we do towards language. If we never read outside of Scripture or commentaries, then really we're in some ways dishonoring the Word, not explicitly, but implicitly. And it has an effect because we're very much caught up into image now and so forth. Earlier, so I want to backtrack a little bit because I was just thinking while we were talking about things that I needed to connect Paideia to Christian practice and so forth. So a couple of things. In Ephesians 6 verse 4, Paul talks about, bringing up your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. Depends on your translation. The word fear there is Paideia. Nothing to do. Fear is a terrible translation. I don't know where they even got that from. Other than that, Paideia was often very harsh discipline and so forth. But
Nurture, is that a better word?
Or the nurture and admonition, the nurture. But the word is Paideia explicitly. And so Paul chooses the Greek word as a Hebrew. He thinks about the Greek culture and all that. What's the best word to pick this up? And he uses Paideia. And the other word he uses is nouthesia, which is related to a transformed mind and so forth. But what I noted as I thought about this over the years, not back when I was in Durham, but as I worked as a literature professor and so forth, is this is rooted to the greatest commandment, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Jesus asked what the greatest commandment is. He cites that, citing Deuteronomy, the Shema, the context of which is education. And for Christians then, Paideia involves education through love. But love includes that dynamic of father-son, and in fact, it's in Ephesians 6, that's exactly what it is. Your children, you're to obey your parents, and there's even a promise given to it, because then it'll go well with you in the land, but so you're to show honor your father and mother. And that whole dynamic of honor and shame, which is so much a part of the ancient world and ancient culture, and in fact, every culture to this day is built on shame and honor. Ours not. We've lost shame. We've lost honor as well. Western, like Canada, there's no sense of shame. Just look at what people wear, how they talk, how they speak to one another. It's extraordinary, degrading, demeaning, and not only towards others, but towards themselves, like what they do to their bodies and so forth. So there's no shame.
Honor.
And there's no honor.
No.
But in the Western world, historically, shame and honor governed everything, literally. And if you go outside of the Western world, it still governs it. If you meet Chinese people, it is an honor culture. If you meet Muslims, it is even more so. Honor is everything. If you shame a Muslim in public, you're going to get a volatile response. Same in Chinese culture. Well, they're actually closer to our heritage in that sense than we are. The shamelessness and lack of honor it is disgraceful. It truly is. But you're thinking, hold on, we're Western, we're Christian. And so, well, how did we walk so far away from shame and honor? And the answer is the orphan paradigm. Because there's no honor other than honoring yourself. There's no shame because there's no public standards to hold yourself to. Now, if you promote a culture of orphanage for 200 years, there's nothing left of shame and honor. So Paideia, in terms of Christian Paideia, is going to have to recover honor and shame, but also connected to love and reconnected to the family, but also culture in general, treating others with love and so forth. So that needs to be built back out.
It's interesting that Paul follows the trajectory, or maybe we should say the descent from honoring God to the dishonoring of our bodies. When you go from worship to idolatry, you have honor and you have dishonor and idolatry. And as we've rejected the Christian faith, we have correspondingly we dishonor everything. We dishonor ourselves, we dishonor our neighbor, we dishonor the institutions, we dishonor the generations. You know, someone even wrote recently, but one of the characteristics of the revolutionary spirit is the dishonoring of previous generations.
It's
everything.
Ritual.
Yes, right.
It's a requirement.
Yes.
That you do so. In order to be authentic, in order to show your own identity, you do this. You say you do it autonomously, but nobody can act autonomously. So you do it by differentiation. Right.
But if the promise or the promise of kind of blessing comes through, at least in part, our capacity to honor our parents. And I would say that that principle fleshes its way out as well. You know, treat older women as mothers, older men as fathers, younger women as sisters. Paul doesn't just say it's located exclusively within the family. It's that principle of you honor God, you honor your parents, you honor legitimate ordained authority, you honor the emperor.
Yes.
You know what I mean? As that happens, there's an order that can provide a context for life and flourishing. Whereas the opposite is true, that everyone wants a revolution now, having not lived through one. And it's actually severing us from all potential blessing of prosperity. Do you know what I mean? But it's a lie that everyone on the left and the right believes. We just need a revolution. We need to tear it down. And these boomers don't get it. And you know what I mean? And it's just like the rejection wholesale of any moral duty to honor anyone or anything.
Anyone or anything but ourselves.
Yeah, that is not going to result in human flourishing.
It cannot.
No, it results in shame. I mean, that's... that's what that's
perpetual shame.
Perpetual shame.
Like, shame is also a byproduct of the whole thing. And
then we have pride parades.
Yeah.
Right, and then we have people that want to be their self-identity to be honored by others. And so there's no objective standing that would say, well, how do I know that I'm not dishonoring you? Well, I have to get you to self-identify. Tell me what your pronouns are. Then I'll know what to call you in order to address you. I think, why are people demanding this? Because they feel shame and they want to be honored, but there's no way of doing that to an orphan who's self-identifying other than to get them to tell you their pronouns. But like, this is a crazy hamster wheel that just...
It doesn't actually remove the shame.
It doesn't. It can't. It can't.
No.
It's not. I'm not disparaging anybody by saying that it's the process is an impossible one.
Yes.
But everyone wants honor.
Right.
Everyone. It's part of bearing the image and likeness of God. We want to be honored, and we want to live honorable lives. We want other people to respect us, to look up to us. And if you dishonor people, even if they don't recognize the category, they go crazy. Anyway,
So
back to education.
yes.
Final piece.
Yeah.
So paideia there, Paul uses that word, and Jesus and roots it to love. Cicero talks about humanitas in relation to education. And in the word humanitas, he has two words in mind. One is paideia, and the other is philanthropy. And philanthropy, the love of mankind, he finds that in literature. So paideia and the use of literature in education is what he means by humanitas. But humanitas now is not the concept of humanity, but something that makes us human. It humanizes us. So studying literature through is a form of paideia that by which we become more what we are.
Yes.
And he finds that in classical texts,
Right.
chiefly Greek texts.
Right.
Is that, this is maybe just a stupid question, but I just finished a Dostoevsky book, and he talks about how the revolutionaries are always talking about how they love humanity, but they hate individual humans.
Yes.
You know, is it like
Yeah.
that in the classical world too? Like, is this love of humanity actually expressed in a love for individual people, or were they incapable of doing that because they didn't have a right understanding of human nature?
So in the classical world, they did love individuals, but the individuals were male, first of all, only, and they had to be citizens. If you were not a male citizen, then you weren't considered worthy of the category of individual. Christianity transforms that, of course, because it says that everyone bears the image and likeness of God, male, female, slave,
free.
children,
Free.
all of those are included under that. So So they did have the category of individual. It just didn't include everyone that we call individuals.
Yes.
So you had to have property. You had to be male. You had to have a certain standing. But they recognized the worth and value of an individual. So individualism comes from the pagan world. It just doesn't apply to women, children, slaves, and others.
Yes.
Right.
And Jesus makes this observation, and it's so profound that even the pagans, so to speak, they love their own.
Absolutely.
What is it when you love your own? Like even those guys do that.
Of course.
And you can look at like a lot of jihadi families. You can look at a lot of Nazis who are very loving family people in the sense, but loving your own is actually love for yourself.
Of course.
And this is what's different about Christian love is that Christian love is actually the love at expense to yourself for the good of other people. And so even though, after the fall, people still talk about the necessity of loving other people and even loving individuals and this and thing. Apart from Christ, there's some distortion somewhere that it's either not extended to everybody or it really is just a reflection of our love for ourselves. But the nature of the cross, this is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us and gave his son for the propitiation of our sins. And, so a lot of people would love a righteous man, but few people would die for their enemies. You know what I mean? And this is what the love of Christ demonstrates to us. And this is what pulled the world out of a perpetual tribalism and a perpetual, vengeance cycle. And it's not that no one before had the thought that you should love your spouse or kids or family or tribe or whatever. It's that it went beyond that. It's interesting, speaking about education, I just read part of an article recently about how we are entering, it's a book that I ordered. I haven't read it yet. But the title intrigued me, and it's how we're entering a post-literate state in Western culture. And it kind of throws the whole, emancipation through education narrative on its head. It's like, okay, so we have undermined the family. We have rejected the transcendent. We've rejected the true and the living God. And we have pursued, in the name of progress and justice, this project without all those things. And what do we have going into the year of our Lord 2026? We have illiteracy. It's like we got over illiteracy a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we're going back into it. A question I have, just a practical question is, when you were mentioning honor, I was thinking about British culture. And even though we have rejected it, I was in Ottawa this week at the Royal Ontario, the War Museum. We took our students there for their year-end trip. And it's a fantastic museum, grotesque architecture, but the exhibits are fantastic. There's no woke stuff. As far as I can tell, there wasn't revisionism taking place. It's just kind of artifacts and descriptions, which is what you like in a museum.
Yeah, it is.
But it reminded me that there is such an overlap between British culture and Canadian culture that my whole life, everyone's been trying to eradicate. And if you look at, I mean, even the biography of Churchill that I've been working on for 7 years, I always thought I've been taught to think of the British, whether from movies or something like this, like soft. And, it's always the Indians are cool and the redcoats are cowards. But they conquered the world. And the aristocrats went to war. And Churchill he wasn't a warmonger, but he certainly was eager for war in the sense that it was almost like a child. Like he was like a child who...
Glory of the empire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even the wealthy and whatever, there was a culture of duty that existed. And it resulted in like sacrifice.
Noblesse oblige.
A little bit of that as well. But he was a real imperialist.
He was a real imperialist,
There's no doubt.
But my question for you is, where do you see in the West kind of the peak or a peak of Christian culture? And what is some literature of the time period that you would, if literature helps expose us to humanity and to the truth and to the world as the way it is, it makes sense that the more, flowing out of a Christian worldview it is, the more helpful it is. What are some works of literature that you would recommend to our listeners?
Well, I mentioned Paradise Lost. That was so profoundly influential on me. I think it's a high point of literature and Western civilization. It's written in an epic. That's part of its appeal. The epic touches concerns that you do not get in novels and or in lyrics or any other form of literature. It's really an encyclopedic genre. It covers the heavens. It talks about what's going on in hell or the underworld. It talks about life after the grave. It talks about human history. It talks about, what a human being is, what the good life is, all of those concerns. So Paradise Lost, I think, is absolutely the pinnacle on the mountain. But the late 16th, early 17th, so that Elizabethan 17th century literature, for me, the height is right there in the golden age of English literature. Because I've heard people say that Dante is the pinnacle of this. I can't agree. It's too obscure and arcane in its references. I mean, it's a great work of literature, don't get me wrong, but it is very much of a political work of literature about Dante and Italian politics and so forth, which makes it very remote from contemporary concerns. And because Milton focuses on the account of not the politics of his day, although that's in there, there is a critique of monarchy and promoting republicanism, but it's about the fall of mankind. I mean, it's a much broader theme than an individual caught up in the world of the Italian Renaissance and the city-state there and so forth. As great as it is, and it is great, but it is not, by comparison, as nearly as accessible. And its influence is enormous. It was once, alongside the Bible, the most read work of literature. Bible, Milton, Pilgrim's Progress, those three. Everyone who came over across the Atlantic had those three books and would have read them, and you can see how it affects literature written after that as well. All the romantics that I mentioned are trying to imitate Milton and cast it in French Revolutionary terms, which doesn't work very well, but still the influence is marked and it's clear. So Mary Shelley's Frankenstein reads Paradise Lost when he's trying to identify himself, create his own identity. He sees himself in the form of Adam in relation to the Creator and so forth. But again, he's not taught from the Christian meaning of it. He just sees that idea of an abandoned orphan the creator, the scientist has left him, et cetera, et cetera. But it's there all over literature then, Milton. And I'll see the same thing for Shakespeare. Same sort of eminence and importance in British culture. When I lived in the UK, they had a program on Radio 4 called Desert Island Discs, and they would have some celebrity on, and they would, favorite 6 pieces of music, tell a bit about yourself. Okay, now at end of the program, okay, you're on a desert island. We're giving you the Bible. We're giving you the works of Shakespeare. What else do you want on your desert island? But that was the premise, is that you're going to have those two, because when they first did the show, everybody would have said, oh, if I'm going to be on an island all by myself, I want the Bible or something, or I want Shakespeare. Okay, aside from those two, what do you want?
Right.
Occasionally a guest would say, I don't want a Bible on my island, but that is how it began. And that's because the influence and effect of Shakespeare and the Bible on British consciousness. It's just so much a part of it.
So what would some other examples be of literature from that time period?
I love, the lyrics of Donne and Herbert, myself, Andrew Marvell, but I think Herbert and Donne are superior. I do think the late Elizabethan literature of Spencer and Sidney, although it's allegorical and some people find that challenging, but I think the Arthurian romances are, although they're earlier, are very influential. Milton actually thought about writing on the life of King Arthur, interestingly, before abandoning that and deciding to focus on the epic instead. But there's very much of the Arthurian idea of the, logres, or the Camelot and the Knights of the Round Table, that's sort of central to English consciousness, this idea of equality around the table, and yet they're the king who is the first among equals. That permeates a whole culture. And under the Reformation, then it does get expressed. I think that idea that's there in Magna Carta and in the Arthurian romances then gets passed on and becomes practical, so that families start to develop their own traditions and become richer and richer. So the middle class arises out of this. And that's very English. You don't see that in other cultures and other countries. So, I'm an English speaker, so maybe I'm just biased here, but I think you can see the consequences of British culture permeating down through the American experiment, which is really an it's a British argument against British. So it's almost a repetition of what happens when Cromwell and the Republicans, fight with Charles over monarchy. The same thing's going on in the U.S., saying you are not giving us our dignity, and there's a limitation on your rule here, and you're not acknowledging it. We're not just your imperial subjects. We are families. We're people that bear the image of God, and you have to give us some sort of autonomy here, not autonomy of freedom, although sometimes they call it autonomy. But that playing out is very much of an English-speaking world's consciousness. You don't see it elsewhere.
So this brings up another thing I wanted to ask you about, is the connection between a biblical view of humanity and the kind of spreading out, the recognition of various God-ordained spheres of authority, to use a Kuyperian term. Yep. And you have obviously... you might say there's British culture, you have the Magna Carta, and progressing from there, you have America. And, we have grown up in a world that didn't ever really exist in the world for most people. And
Absolutely.
People talk about the Greeks and democracy, but
no,
come on.
No.
The world that we inhabited, the freedoms that we enjoy are built on a biblical view of humanity, amongst other things.
Yes.
And what we're seeing now with the rejection of a biblical worldview and a true faith is the concentration of authority within where it inevitably goes to the most powerful person, which is now the state. And so you do see a connection between our rejection of a biblical view of humanity and just the recognition of the dignity of the family unit, the individual still, the church, the state, even like Christians recognize the dignity of the state as well. But how do you see this maybe we could segue to kind of a contemporary issue. Like, how do you see this posing a major problem? Like, do you think we're going to descend into we are descending into totalitarianism?
Absolutely.
You know,
see that.
And it seems inevitable at this point.
Well, the bulwarks against that are a strong family and a strong intergenerational culture, which can offer alternatives to a state-governed totality of life. Mm-hmm. And as we, give over those responsibilities to the state, we lose the muscles to be able to flex in the ways that we would need to hold on to our freedom. Mm-hmm. So and the growth in government makes for a weaker people. Mm-hmm. So that's part of I'm not a libertarian, but this is the part of the libertarianism that I agree with, is that even if I have a view of the state that it has a legitimate role, which I do, I also recognize that if I give it too much, that it makes me weaker and my family weaker. And as a result of that, even though the state does good things, it becomes a monster, not a servant. And so there's a limit to government, and I would like to keep it limited because I want the state to receive its honor, but that honor needs to be limited. Otherwise, it becomes totalitarian inevitably, and everyone suffers for that. Mm-hmm. So the challenge then is to build up a culture that is sufficiently strong that it will be able to stand alongside the state, and each will observe their proper boundaries. And then we avoid the problems of totalitarianism, which is almost inevitable in a technological age, especially if people are regarding themselves as orphans and handing their children over the education of others who don't mentor them and don't regard it as their job to mentor them. I'm not there to be your role model. I'm here to teach you not what to think, but how to think. Mm-hmm. This is absurd. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm supposed to teach you what to think as well as how to think.
Yes.
But you're not to think for yourself alone. You're supposed to think rightly. Mm-hmm. And rightly, there is an objective standard of right. Mm-hmm. Of course, I want people to think for themselves, but thinking for themselves as an absolute is an absurd premise.
Yes.
Right?
I think of Isaiah 55, let the wicked man forsake his way and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Like you have to bring your thoughts in line with God, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For my thoughts are not your thoughts and my ways are not your ways.
But that's your authentic self.
Right.
My authentic self's a real jerk. You guys don't want to know that.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot like mine. So I think
well, I mean, and this is to bring up Charles Taylor here. I mean, that is a hallmark of our contemporary view of humanity, right? That there's something inside of us that is genuine and authentic, and it is the goal of the individual to express that. Self-expression is like the highest aim. Now, there's a lot
it's very romantic, right?
Yeah, it's very romantic. It's Disney. That's basically the Disney ethos in some ways.
Absolutely.
The problem
Heroes
is,
are all orphans there, right?
Yes,
as well, of course, yes.
Yes, the orphan who must express themselves. And it's often the father who is, if he's not evil, he's just slow. Like he doesn't get it.
If he's around at all. He's usually not.
Around. Yeah. Yes. But the problem with self-expression as an ultimate aim and kind of ethic is that it's not possible for everyone to do that. Because what if my expression of myself comes into conflict with your expression of myself, and then we inevitably find ourselves in just a clash of power.
The other irony is that self-expression usually always ends up looking the same. Like you just look like everybody else that's expressing their self. You don't look original.
And we've seen over the last 50 years in Western culture, this culture of authenticity is more and more conformity. It's extraordinary levels of conformity. Yes. Everyone being individual and autonomous and yet looking remarkably the same.
Yes.
It's great for commodification. You can sell a lot of products to people that are going to be, be themselves and yet buy the same products to be different. Mm-hmm. It's like, really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing, though, you say that what we assume is that we understand ourselves, and I'm not sure that we actually do. I don't think people understand themselves at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, I pose this in my doctoral thesis as the central problem of Romanticism and hermeneutics is that it assumes that it knows itself objectively, but it does so from the perspective of the subject. You can't be the subject and the object at the same time, or even separately. You have to see yourself objectively, yes, but the person who sees themselves objectively is subjective. And that person says, well, that person who I am is really good. Is my verdict on that valid? Like, how can I possibly obtain a stable understanding of myself that everyone else will recognize?
Yes.
So autonomy is an impossible postulate for anthropology. I don't have a shared common nature with anyone else. And in fact, I don't even know my own human nature.
Yes.
I have to appeal to a standard outside myself. So this is a key point for me as a Christian. If I want to recover who I am, I have to know what a human being is.
Yes.
And although I know I am one, I can't come to this solution of what that is. I need to look to somebody who's a legitimate expression of human nature. And who is that? That's Christ.
Yes.
He is the one who acts the way I would like every human being to act.
Yes.
And I saw him do so. And that was the story. Even his enemies marveled at him.
Yeah.
But so that is the worthiest man who ever lived. That's him. Okay, so if I am a man, then I'm going to see my identity in him. I'm going to imitate him, etc. Okay, and that leads to the connection then. But you can't self-identify as the beginning of your human nature. You have to find it outside yourself and imitate that then.
And even, what the biblical worldview allows for just that. I'm thinking, you search me and you know me. And it's the idea that there is a personal God, our creator, who fashioned us in his image and likeness, and through his son has redeemed us, and he's given us his spirit, and he actually has personal knowledge of us.
Yeah.
And
Also,
not only does he have that knowledge, but he has revealed to us through special revelation, to a degree, he has revealed that to us. And there's I won't say who it is, but there's a famous comedian, well-known, like top podcaster in the world these days, and he has made several comments recently about his kind of searching and seeking with Christianity. And multiple times he's just described the loneliness he feels.
Yeah.
And I think this is where you inevitably end up. If you've been told your whole life, find yourself, you know what I mean? Discover yourself, be yourself. It sounds romantic. It sounds inspiring and appealing.
He's trapped in the orphan myth.
You're trapped in the orphan myth.
That's his problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not the freedom that I was promised. This place is hell. Like, I don't know myself. And then you introduce not only the limits of creatureliness, but the fallenness of our sin. Like, the heart is wicked and deceitful above all things. I feel this is probably why I don't journal.
I don't either.
Because I actually am like, what's the point of me saying things I think about myself?
It could be self-deceptive.
I could just be writing this because I like the look of the words. And I think about what people will think when and I have those thoughts. And then I'm just like, I don't want to write. I don't want to journal every day to figure myself out. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I think I do. It's the introspective method that you don't find very helpful. I don't find it very helpful either. I think it's useful for some people. It's useful probably looking retrospectively, a decade behind, well, what was I like then and what am I like now? So I can see progress per se. But I don't even know if I can do that. A wise pastor once said to me, you don't get to write your own report card. You're not going to be the judge of your progress in life. That's not your job. Press onwards, point forwards, look to Christ, but don't. Yeah, I don't know about the journaling thing. It's not that it's a terrible thing, but I don't find it particularly helpful. In terms of discipleship, it being active and looking forward, I think, is the way forward, and not looking within. And journaling seems to do that. For me, I don't find it helpful.
I used to journal quite a bit when I was younger, and I think young adults and teens are sort of have a proclivity to be overly emotional, but I think it sort of
helps you detach yourself from yourself and cool and calm, write it down as well. I think writing is an important thing. So
yeah. And there's a lot of ways you can write.
As a negative thing for myself, like you're writing all this stuff, and you're trying to justify why you were disobedient or whatever. You're coming up with all these emotional arguments and how I felt, and I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
And my wife journals, but her journaling is more, she reads the Bible and comments on it.
Okay, that's a different sort
of journaling. It's completely the opposite direction.
Yes.
And then it's almost like a prayer to God in response to his revelation.
Right.
But what most people who aren't Christians, especially think of journaling, it is a look inward.
It's just introspection.
And say things. And when I've done that in the past, I'm almost aware that I'm lying. I'm like,
well, I gotta put this down for paper. If somebody ever reads this, I want to make it sound better than
or something. So don't do that. But maybe we could transition to a brief conversation about transhumanism.
Okay.
And this is something I've heard you touch on before. What is transhumanism? For succinctly, for people who may have heard the term but never really learned more than that, because I think it's critical for today to understand this.
Yeah, transhumanism comes at the end of a long move away from Christian humanism. So I think, the word humanism in Christian circles is a bad word for some. Anyway, it's not a bad word for me, but I understand why it's a bad word for them. What they mean by that is Christless humanism, a humanism detached from the Imago Dei and Christ's full humanity, which is then the example or demonstration of who we are as human beings. In that sense, I get it. But so the humanism, first of all, then is that it's the Imago Dei being expressed in individual human beings. The first understanding of that is the idea of the human person, even. And it's actually a Christian invention, the idea of person. Individual, yes, we saw that in the classic world. That is there. Personhood is not. Personhood is a concept that we get from reflections on the Trinity. There are three persons, one God. If God is personal, that means that those who bear his image are also personal. So what is a persona? It's a word used from acting. It's a mask. They wear a mask. There are three personas, and persona and person. The Boethius and Augustine come up with the idea that a person, and that Boethius's language here, is an individual substance of a rational nature. I would have to take a long time to articulate all of those things. Individual, what that is meant. Substance, what do you mean by that? Rational, and nature. Those four words all need to be teased out and explain what we mean by those. But let's just stick with rational. To be a human being is to have the capacity for reason. To be a person, though, if you want to think about Christian theology, is to have a relational character. Think about the Trinity. The Trinity is, on the other hand, the basis of all our capacity for understanding things, because the thing about God's triune nature is that he is both three and one. And he's unified, ultimately one. He's the one, there's only one God, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay, so then it's three. Well, which is it? Well, it's both. They're equally ultimate. Well, how is that possible? Well, if you don't think that, then you cannot explain the differentiated realities that you see all around you, the particulars that are unified in the concept of things like beauty and truth and goodness. We can't say that this table is beautiful. It's only the beautiful. But there's no there's no particular instances of that. So the Trinity allows us for that individual, so that reality can be both true and beautiful and good, and not just ultimate reality being those things, although with respect to personhood, then a person also has the dignity of God as well, and that then gets played out. Okay, I said all of that and too quickly to get to what transhumanism is, because transhumanism still thinks that there's something good in the human.
Okay.
It still thinks that there's something good there, and it wants to extend it, and it usually wants to extend it through technology. In terms of humanism, historically, humanism is recovering the image of God and expressing it fully. That's the aim of education. That's Paideia, right? So you want humanity to be the most fully human. And so actually the word transhumanism, I think the first instance of it is at the end of Dante's, the first canto of the Paradiso.
Wow.
He talks about transhuman, but he doesn't mean anything like what our contemporary transhumanists mean. He doesn't mean.
Well, he called that.
He calls it, but he's talking about it as humanity exalted in its fullest form, so it's closest to God in heaven and so forth.
Do you mean more like transcending our humanity?
Yeah, well, while retaining it at the same time and be more divinization is what he means there, something more. But that's not what the transhumanists mean. They see the human nature as something good in us that's going to be extended pretty much eternally.
But they separate the humanism, like our humanity, from our bodies. Like there's a Gnostic element there, right?
Well, so the whole, if you wanted to go through the whole process of moving from the Christianization of the individual, which involves personhood, to the contemporary transhumanists, then you have to talk about Descartes, you have to talk about Kant, you have to talk about the utilitarians, you have to talk about Nietzsche, all of these figures along the way, and that's a very long conversation on its own. Let's just take the Cartesian bit that you talked about. Descartes says that I think, therefore I am. And he says that the fact that he's thinking allows him to understand what being is. Later writers will say, well, he never actually establishes what being is. All he establishes that he's thinking. He knows that he's thinking because he knows that he's doubting. Actually, when it comes down to it, he doesn't even know that he's thinking. All he knows is that he's doubting. He's doubting everything that he can see. But doubting is a form of thinking. So yeah, but then it gets the idea of the thinking self. But that's already a disembodied self. And if you regard that as the foundation of modernity, the Cartesian and all modern philosophies, they point to Descartes as now we get to modern philosophy. Yes, but that is a disembodied self.
Right.
So the transhumanists come along and say, yeah, that thinking substance, that thinking thing that I am, I want to extend that eternally and keep that going. So transhumanists will do things like say, I want to export my conscious or upload my consciousness into a computer so that it carries on. Whatever is me of that thinking thing can carry on eternally and so
it
forth.
Can either live on in a robot or in the
Any
future
form.
some sort of new biological.
We'll try and create it so that my body will live forever. That's part of the movement. But even if it can't do that, at least my consciousness will, because my consciousness is my true self after Descartes. So it can have the form of, let me keep my physical body as fit as long as I possibly can, and let me inject, young babies' blood into me so that I retain eternal youth or whatever. Like you hear all sorts of weird things that people would call them. Or you move into the more detached noumenal sense of let me keep my consciousness in cyberspace on the internet that's transhuman. At least they think there's something good about myself that they want to retain. Even though it's a degraded sense of human nature, it's not an embodied one. It's not a relational one. It's not a personal one. It's not a loving one. It's a wholly self-absorbed, self-centered, rational orphan sense of self. They at least want to hold on to it. The posthumanists think that there's no difference between us and animals.
Right.
Except that we're inferior to them because our moral nature has demonstrated itself throughout human history. And really, we ought to eradicate ourselves. We should stop having children. Those are the posthumanists.
Yeah.
The radical environmentalists.
After you, sir.
Yeah, after you, sir. And they're happy to do that.
Yeah.
So it's a death and suicide cult. The posthumanists are. We're gonna prevent you from having babies, and we're not gonna have them ourselves. And we're gonna do this out of righteousness towards the planet. And so they take human nature and they reduce it to the human, or they reduce it to the animal. They don't thereby exalt the animals. They simply
put us beneath them.
Beneath them, and that's all that happens. So it's a diabolical agenda. But transhumanism is little better. So both of them, the solution to both of them is a robust view of humanism, which is Christian humanism.
The dignity of man. The
dignity of mankind, and mankind here being man, woman, child.
Yes.
Unborn at the end of life. That dignity being expressed everywhere as a fact that we bear the image of God in Jesus Christ and we owe love to one another. And that's expressed in ways that Scripture articulates better than anywhere else. That's how we're going to combat transhumanism and posthumanism. But transhumanism and posthumanism have a lot of money behind them.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
I mean, this stuff really affects the church too. I think even the ease with which Christians are willing to cremate after death.
I've always been bothered by it.
It's just like as if it doesn't matter. Your body just doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's a funny old thing because in the Odyssey, Elpenor falls overboard and Odysseus meets him in the underworld and he hasn't got over the river Styx because he can't. And he says, you got to go back and get me. Oh, Elpenor, how did you get here ahead of us? Well, I died. That's how I got here. And you didn't even realize it. But now, please, when you're going back home, first you got to go back, get my body and bury it. And then I'll be able to get over to the other side. They understood that the body was something that you ought to treat with dignity. One of the worst things that Achilles does is he takes his enemy and drags him 3 times around the gates of Troy. Even though Hector was an honorable man, he disgraced him. Even the gods are incensed at the treatment of the human body there. We have no such sense of the honor of the human body.
In the Old Testament, when they wanted to desecrate something, they would burn human bones on it, right? Like,
yes.
One of the judgments against all the idolaters is that their priests would have their bodies burned on the altar.
Yeah.
As this is some sort of desecrating ceremony.
Yeah. And I think that in the modern shameless, dishonoring sense of ourselves, people think that cremation and there's something liberating about it.
Yeah.
It
takes up less space, right?
Well, there's a utilitarian. There's and
it's cheaper, not by much.
I mean, the Scot in me gravitates towards that, but
it's not that much of a difference.
It really is not much of a difference. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just degrading.
It's also, I don't know, interesting isn't the word, insidious.
Yeah,
how a lot of this posthumanism and transhumanism. When I hear you speaking, I mean, this is our culture.
It is.
But people don't defend it honestly.
No.
They still pretend that we're doing made for compassion.
Yeah.
They still act like abortion is a human right.
Yes.
And healthcare.
Yeah.
And it's like they have to appeal to Christian virtues and a Christian worldview in order to justify their anti-Christian death cult.
Yeah.
Like if they just came out and said, look, the body doesn't matter. It is what it is. Your mom's gone. Just burn her ashes. Like that's not a good sales pitch.
No.
But or
at least it would be honest on their part.
Yeah, it would be honest on their part. But or with MAID, it's like you know what? After the age of 55, they're a major tax burden, and we don't really have a better solution than this. So it's like what we're gonna do. It's like okay, that's honest. But what they have to do is appeal to Christian virtue.
Yeah.
And I think we need to see through, well, of course, we need to see through those lies, and we need to call them at that point. And what conservatives do is they grant the premise. It's like,
I can't grant the premise.
It's just like, well, I don't want to be told I don't have compassion. It's
right.
like, well, don't accept the premise.
Yeah.
Like how about you challenge them at that point?
Yeah, and I know we did the same thing under COVID, of course.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, with respect to that, a healthcare profession that can't distinguish between healing and killing is not to be trusted in its judgments about, especially about things like life and death matters, about when life begins, when it ends. If you're willing to kill and you call these people doctors and you license them and authorize them and require them to do it as a matter of conscience as doctors, you're at that point, you're in a very wicked state of human affairs.
Well, it is the antithesis to healthcare.
Yeah.
Once you allow for murder as a treatment method, you've actually undermined the entire medical pursuit. Not just the administration, but even the development of new technologies and new medicines and new procedures. And why? Why would you do that if you don't need to preserve human life anymore?
Well, it's the diabolical agenda that's crept into So once universities move away from their Christian foundations and no longer acknowledge creedal Christianity as the basis for the university, you get a system whose whole intellectual basis is detached from human personhood, divine personhood, and Christian ethics that's inherent in that, and you get something more and more, which under the guise of knowledge and of humanitarian exercises doesn't know what the human is.
Yeah.
And that's the great illustration of it. And my friend, Dr. John Patrick, who was one of the founders of Augustine College there early on, he said to me, he practiced medicine in Africa for years. He noted that the Hippocratic Oath, which our doctors take and always took, still take, goes back to the ancient world. One of the first aspects of the Hippocratic Oath is to first do no harm. They have removed that from the Hippocratic Oath.
Really? Someone told me that recently. That's so insidious.
Decades ago. Because,
Wow.
of course, they realize that if that was part of the Hippocratic Oath, and they can see that they're doing harm, then they're not going to do it. The doctor's going to
Yeah.
say, hold on, I gave an oath not to do that. Well, what are we going to do? We'll change the Hippocratic Oath. We still take the Hippocratic Oath, but it's not the Hippocratic Oath that was once taken.
Wow.
And so you've severed medicine from healthcare at that
Yes,
point.
yes.
At that point, healthcare includes harm.
Yes.
It no longer explicitly forbids harm. Well, then the healthcare system cannot be fixed until
No.
you fix that
No.
conceptual problem right there.
Yes.
And as soon as you say, I won't do harm as a doctor, I've sworn an oath to it, then you won't do MAID, then you won't do euthanasia, then
Yeah.
you won't do abortion, then
Yeah.
you will not do gender reassignment. You won't do any of those things because I'm harming people.
Yes.
So the oaths that we take matter, and the oaths need to be changed, recovered, restored to a more humanistic culture, shall we say.
And I suppose maybe we'll close on this, but the hope for us is that the church has always had our view of humanity has always been, in one sense, the antithesis to the world's view. Like, we've always had a culture of life and respecting human dignity, even while the world doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom Holland, the historian Tom Holland, one of his kind of big insights is that as a classicist, he loved Rome and history, but he realized that he's so far detached from it that everyone's like, oh yeah, the Greeks and the Romans, we come from the Greeks and the Romans. And he's looking around, he's just like, no, we didn't. It's like, you don't know anything about those guys. You would not want to live in that world.
No.
The world that we live in is one that has been profoundly shaped by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's just a fact.
It is a fact.
And so, I mean, kind of the hope is that the gospel has actually invaded the world in a culture of death to bring forth life and human flourishing and the valuing of humanity and the educational methods that correspond to that, and never perfectly, and it will never be this side of glory, but God absolutely can do that again. And I think for our listeners, the church plays the central role in the reestablishment of human dignity in society.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen through our politicians. It's not going to happen through the media or whatever other institution and mechanism. Mm-hmm. It's going to be as Christ is proclaimed and as he is exalted and men and women are drawn to him and they are actually saved. One of the consequences is that humanity is dignified and is restored to its dignified position and is considered sacred. And life is considered sacred, not as a slogan, but as something innate to us. And I know, this is why we're doing this podcast, and this is why we do almost everything we do, is that God would actually, break into this culture of death, this cult of death that Canada has become, that the West has become. Like the rape gang stuff came out this week.
Terrible.
It's like, what further evidence do you need that unbelief goes to death, that all who hate me love death? Like when your own daughters are absolutely ravaged by foreigners with the knowledge and even,
Complicity.
of the ruling. Like we've gone so far off the rails. There's nothing sacred anymore. There's nothing honored.
No.
There's no shame.
There's no shame.
And so
No responsibility.
Yes, no responsibility. But, the Lord can reverse it, and we pray that he will.
Yeah.
Do you have a text to read there, Jared?
I do, but we're just going to cut it off like that? We're good? I don't have anything else to say. That's a lot to chew on.
I feel like we go for 4 hours.
Yeah. So I talked about my early days of conversion in Durham. One of the things I thought about doing at that point, because I was so moved by what I had come to understand, that I thought about abandoning my PhD and going to the pastoral ministry. And I was encouraged not to do that by my pastor there, which I found perplexing. And it wasn't because he didn't think that it was worth doing. He just said, stick with it, finish what you've started.
Yeah.
And if you feel that you ought to, have to, are called to, then do so. But don't just abandon what you're doing because it's of no significance, because it is of significance. I did serve as a pastor in Toronto for a while. But the wisdom of his counsel early on became clear to me, because it the ministry of the church extends into the academy, and
Yes.
part of my vocation is educating people as Christians in my sphere, which happens to be a very important sphere. It's the humanities, what Cicero talked about, philanthropy. The humanitarians are not philanthropists. They don't even know what a human being is.
Yeah.
That's where we're at these days, eh?
They don't know what a
Yeah.
human being is. How can you be a philanthropist if you don't know what a human being is?
Yes.
Your agenda, your aim, I mean, you might be handing out, contraception to
Yes.
people that are just going to cut them off from their children and
not
from the
loving.
future. That's not loving.
That's not
It's
philo.
also not humanitarian. It cannot
Yeah.
be philanthropy if you're actually stopping life from even being conceived. And, getting rid of the world's hunger problem. Well, we can get rid of the hunger problem. Sure. We'll just kill all the people who are
Yes.
hungry. That's solved the hunger
Yeah.
problem, right? Well,
Yeah.
gosh.
That's how they solve the autism problem, right?
It is,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, we've solved autism. We'll just kill all the babies with autism.
That's right.
Yeah.
Those genetic, malformities, we'll just take care of that.
Yeah, Down syndrome.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Anyway, so I think that education, which you brought me to talk about that, in relation to the humanities, it's very important.
Yes.
And I would encourage people to go into and to consider education as a worthy path of discipleship. I think the apostles, teachers, and so forth, teachers is not just pastors, it is including school teachers and
Yes.
university teachers. And
Yes.
I think the academy is very important in that. As the top in the ladder, it filters down to the teachers that'll be teaching in your schools and so forth. So
Yes.
anyway.
I think one of your colleagues that you put us in touch with, Vishal.
Vishal Mangawati, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
doctor. Yeah, he was
his,
great.
He is
The
fantastic.
major emphasis of his life, goal of his life, is education.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it before we spoke.
That's how we first met.
Yes. Okay,
The
that
third
makes sense.
education revolution.
Yeah, I went to the first conference there in Philadelphia
Yeah.
a few years back, yeah.
Yeah, and this is just the overflow of a Christian understanding of humanity and our purpose in this world. It's not an academics coming in and saying my thing should be your thing. This is a human thing,
Yeah.
right? This is how we grow and mature. This is how we come to know God and glorify God. And I think even in conservative Christian circles, there's been a recognition that the state system, the progressive system is not good, but
Yeah.
there hasn't been a corresponding embrace of a comprehensive education project.
And that's what's necessary.
Yes.
I'm so tired of screaming against the darkness. We have to well, what's good? And
Yes.
let's do that.
Yes.
Let's stop saying this is wrong. We know that's wrong. Everybody knows. Okay, what's the alternative? Let's build it, and then people will go to it. You got to build it first. It's like,
Yeah, this is why the Christless conservatives never fix anything.
right.
No.
They may, they got the old man yelling at the cloud thing down, but
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Excellent. Can I have the last word?
You can have the last word.
I'm going to
Jay.
break from tradition. We normally finish with reading Psalm 72, May He Have Dominion. We're not going to do that today. Psalm 139. Here we go. I got to hit my button here in a moment. Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways, even before a word is on my tongue. Behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. We'll see you next time on the Dominion Podcast.